Hello and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy, and this is the lecture for the month of November 2012. It is entitled Overlap Workflow Intensive. Now, this was actually a Ask Video Mail question that was sent to me, and in the interest of keeping things kind of separate from the Ask Video Mail and from the lecture, I won't show the question because it was a rather long question. And basically what this animator asked me to do was show my workflow for doing overlap. This animator felt that their workflow was taking too long. And that's fine, that's common, that's great that you're focusing on that and that you want to make that change. That's all fantastic stuff, and I'm really happy to talk about it so that you can work those issues out. They sent a file, this animator did, and it was a ball character with a tail, and they just asked me to show off my workflow, basically. So I thought I would, in normal KennyRoy.com fashion, start off this talk with a little bit of workflow recap, but specifically talking about things like overlap that are kind of what I call face value fundamentals. Timing is really not a face value fundamental. Timing is a huge issue. It's basically, 90% of the magic of animation it could be kind of, encompassed under the umbrella of the word timing, couldn't it? So that's kind of hard to talk about. So is staging. Would be another one. Appeal, certainly appeal. Solid drawing for sure. But the face value ones are like anticipation, squash and stretch, overlap, okay, slow in, slow out, arcs. These are all that are a lot more what I call face value fundamentals. Those face value fundamentals, if you haven't seen the advanced workflow lecture, it is in the store right now. You should check that out. Also, for the month of, until probably the end of December, I'm going to leave the free workflow walkthrough part 1, which I really go over my workflow one more time. But for these face value fundamentals, I highly recommend you make it a part of your workflow to incorporate these in a fundamental way, fundamental to your scene. Not just fundamental to animation because that's what they are fundamental to animation. Fundamental to your scene. Take what I call in my workflow the fundamental approach. Okay, and I talk all about that in the advanced workflow lecture, but I'll recap it right now for you, for those of you who haven't seen it. It's been over 2 years. Actually, you know what? I should have celebrated or something like that, but I launched at CTN last year, 2 years ago, and I think we're going great. I think we're going strong. I hope you're having a great time on the site. So I want to just say thank you right now. Take every opportunity I can to thank you for being a part of the site. It is a huge inspiration for me to be here. So you keep it happening. You keep it going. Please tell your friends if you can. Just bring more and more people. I'd love to see more faces here on KennyRoy.com. All right, that's enough of that. So anyway, so in the, should I say, okay, so the fundamental approach really means that you take a look at how your scene is going to come together as a product, as the sum of its parts, basically, and identify which fundamentals are contributing what aspect of that entire whole. All right, so the example I give in the advanced workflow lecture is if you get a top level, very high level note, like make this character sadder, and they're walking down the sidewalk, right? And they've got kind of this walk like this. What would be sadder? Well, oh man, like really just, oh, can't believe it, whatever it is, right? What was the difference, like very, very, very simply, and in animation terms, what was the difference between the first walk I had and the second walk I had? Mostly the back pose and how much the back overlaps. So you think about your scene far in advance. You think way, 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 way ahead to the end of your scene and what aspects of the performance itself are influenced by face value fundamentals. And that's the way my workflow works. And because I do that, I can build in these basically fundamental adjustments that are very easy to fix, very easy to change, very late into the life of the scene, and it makes things a lot easier. That is when it has to do with a little bit more of a performance, a performy kind of action, okay? Now there's two types of like non-performy kind of actions, and that's the physical, where it's like linked to the movement of the body, overlap. I'm talking simply about overlap right now, and when it's not actually really ironed into the pose itself, if it's physical, okay? So again, there are kind of three approaches that I have to overlap. On performance type stuff, it's definitely going to be built in very fundamentally into the pose. The overlap is going to be done normally a little bit more straight ahead, okay, with the physical stuff. And the two types, again, the two types of physical stuff are kind of a little bit more like when it's something that, like for instance, with a ball, with a tail, it's a lot more kind of like something that's attached or glued on. And the last type is when it's built into the body. So the three types might be a gesture where a person is like gesturing with their hand and their wrist overlaps. The first physical type, where it's like ingrained into the body, is when they're like jumping off something and landing. And then the third type, which is basically totally straight ahead, would be like a ball with a tail. Now, the ball with a tail, that is always going to start with a very important decision, which is like how much is the how much is the tail a part of what this character is doing? Basically, how much is the character performing with the tail? On King Kong, for instance, we had T-Rexes and they had tails, and obviously lizards don't do anything with their tails, but cats kind of do. So we borrowed a little bit from the feline world. Whenever the T-Rexes would like see something and they really wanted it, we might do like a little like swish with the tail, or just like a little bit of a flick with the end that showed like a thought had come to mind for the animal. So that all of the talk about overlapping animation, all that starts with a question that you have to answer for yourself, which is how much is the with the tail, how much is it going to be performing? Because that will influence your workflow for overlap, okay? It moves it from that third type, which is just basically like a flopping thing attached to the body, to the second type, which is like physical work, overlap within the body, within the pose, okay? And then the first type again is kind of that real performance kind of stuff, okay? So we're going to start. I know that you're going to be horribly confused now, because we're going to start with the third one and we're going to go backwards. I should have told you in completely different order, okay? But one more time, let me actually just reverse the order right now so we go through it in the order that where I'm going to animate it, okay? So actually, the first type of overlap is when it's just a thing attached to a thing, okay? The second type is when it's a body and it's part of a physical performance, okay? Like spine in like a jump down from something. And the third type is when you are creating a pure performance and it is entirely built into pose. Okay, so those are the 3 types. All right, now it's in the right order, so hopefully no one will get confused. Okay, and we can take a look at a few examples. Now I want to just caveat everything that we're going to do by saying that depending on what level you are in your animation, it will be more or less important that you really take a close look at your workflow. If you haven't written it down, you're not taking it seriously enough. Everyone should have at least one iteration, as rough as it possibly can be, of their workflow written out. Okay? I have mine, and you'll notice that mine doesn't have really anything of the things that I'm talking about in it, because I've animated a few shots in my time. I don't need to think about the way that I approach the 3 different types of overlap. I don't. All I need to do is just continuously remind myself of those very important high-level issues, like, am I really getting the energy in my shot that I dreamt up in my thumbnails? So, like, compare thumbnails is a state of my workflow that shows itself in I think 2 different phases of my workflow. It says compare thumbs, because I need to remind myself to always go for that. So yours won't look anything like mine, and that's okay. But you do need to have it, okay? So every single time it's a workflow-based lecture. I think I said this last month. I said it definitely in the workflow walkthrough 3-part series, definitely in the advanced workflow lecture. Anytime I have a workflow-centered lecture, I always say that if you don't have it written down, you still have not quite yet taken it seriously enough, okay? And that's writing out your workflow. The other thing that I'll say is that there is a huge benefit to journaling your workflow, journaling your process. We too often forget that as we're working, that we are learning not only just like how to do the shot that's in front of us, but like how we should approach all shots. You can make a lot more progress in how you improve if you journal, if you log that process, because it can be very, very telling in your own words, in your own thoughts, what needs to change depending on your results here. Okay, and that's a very simple thing as well. You're supposed to take, a 5-minute break, go up, get some water, stretch your legs, do whatever, at least once an hour as an animator, So this is your perfect chance to do that. Stand up, take a little piece of paper out, like a pad of paper, and just write down just a few thoughts of what you're doing. And it will get more and more clear what you should be writing down as you do it. Right off the bat, it's going to feel weird because there's nothing there on the page yet and you don't know what to say. Just talk about what you've been doing. I've been trying to animate the legs straight ahead on this character on this 200 frame shot. I expect to be done in 2 hours. And then an hour goes by, and then another hour goes by, and you might want to write a little note. I'm definitely not going to be done now. I don't know why I'm not done. It just seems to be taking longer than I expected. As the weeks go by, you won't guess as to why things are not going right or they are going right. You'll have all of that log to pick through and say, hey, you know what? Anytime I try to do anything straight ahead, I go to pose to pose. I delete everything, go to pose to pose. After hours and hours and hours of work. Maybe I should start. Maybe I'm just a pose to pose animator. Maybe I should just do pose to pose, and that might be fine. There are plenty of animators, a lot of them who worked on Lord of the Rings and King Kong, who came from a stop motion background, and basically they posed the entire frame. They didn't rely on any of Maya's interpolation. They basically were stop motion animating, their entire shots. So, it's a fine workflow. Everyone's workflow is going to be different. All right. So the point here is not to copy mine, but to make yours stronger. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at some Maya stuff and jump right in. Okay. Okay, so I went on Creative Crash and I looked for a ball with a tail, and there's a flying fox rig called Flying Fox, and it looks like your standard ball with a tail, which is great. And what's cool is it came with an animated scene. So check this out. So I get a little jump there, which is great. Okay. So this would be really, really good for me to show off the correct workflow. A little bit weird here. The controls are actually the geometry itself. It's very weird. I've never seen one rigged quite like this, but you know what? There's a first for everything, and it looks like it works out okay. And for the most part, this result that this animator got is is decent. Not bad at all. Obviously, personal preference will dictate a lot of the choices that you make with an action like this. I would do it, some things differently, and I'll show you what I would do differently. But I guess the point is that we have basically a bouncing ball with a tail that needs the tail to be worked, and you're here to see the workflow. You're not here to see the results. So let's dive right in, and I'll show you kind of some of the thoughts that go through my mind when I start working. Does this have? Let's see here. Aha! That's how you get that thing to rotate around. Interesting. Cool. So it might be a little bit of a learning curve with the controls here. I'll try to get it as good as possible. Let me delete the animation on these. Animation is not templated, is it? No. Also looks like pretty much everything is on the same axis. Yes. Pretty much everything's on the same axis. I'm just doing a little bit of rig testing as I go. Just make sure. Okay. So I assume this will rotate the ball tail position where I want it. Okay. Cool. All right, that's great. So it doesn't go with the character. That's fine. So let me just jump right in. So this is the first kind. This is where you have pretty much a lifeless. Lifeless is kind of, nothing is lifeless. Kind of the wrong term, but this is when you have basically a pure overlap scenario, where I believe it calls for a straight ahead workflow. And you can do offsets later, and I'll show you what I do when it calls for those as well. Okay, so I'm going to just key the whole tail and this little positioner on frame 1. Auto key is on, and I'm going to watch the animation back and forth a few times and just see really what I'm dealing with here. And sometimes I won't actually create a pose on the first frame. I'll actually start with the moving section because I don't want to get myself into trouble and the tail end up somewhere that is not ideal for me to start the really interesting section with this tail. So I might start where this really starts moving. Okay. So let's just see here. On a little bit of anticipation downwards, the tail is going to curl up. So let's just see what we got here. And you can use character sets if you want. And I was just about to do a little bit of an adjustment on the pose itself, but I normally actually just pose everything and just get the keys on the right frame first, okay? And then by normally 2 frames after a lift off like this, for me it's at its maximum, okay? Now I am going to do some offsets. This is not totally correct. I'm just getting the first, kind of version in here. And I like a little bit more of a floaty tail than this animator apparently does, where the tail kind of goes weightless in air. I think it gives the entire jump a real nice feeling of zero gravity at the top, sort of like a really beautiful slow in, slow out. Okay, so to do that, I'm actually going to, normally do very little at the top here in terms of like getting the tail into pose. I'm just going to actually build that really kind of almost like puffed up pose here in the tail. And this is still pretty straight ahead, what I'm doing here. I don't like how that deforms. Can I translate it? No, I can't. Okay. So if I have that kind of control, like I do with this character, I definitely would save that. You pretty much only want to, if you're doing the straightforward method, you pretty much only want to work with one at a time. It's the same thing with, I'll use a character for the landing that has an IK-FK hybrid spine. It's the same thing with that. You don't want to get a character translating and rotating when you're doing your first straight ahead pass. I find it's better to go through and say like, oh, well, this part needs some translation and this part needs some translation, rather than get to the end of your first pass and be like, hey, wait a minute, his chest is translated like 5 units down and like rotated 90 degrees to the right. How did I get into this position? Because then at some point you're going to have to maybe stand the character up, turn them around, and get them back to some sort of default pose, and you don't want this weird like gimbally moment when that starts happening as well. So definitely I would kind of do one, either rotations or translations at a time. Okay, so kind of this floaty arc at the top is going to uncurl really elegantly as well. And here's another thing that I do. Because I am afraid of getting something that looks a little too crunched up, and I'm always thinking about how the rotations are going to sort themselves out. I'll normally zero a pose at the top, and kind of rebuild the whole thing. I've kind of forgotten about this position controller. One trick, I'm not sure if it's a trick, but one thing that I do is if I've forgotten to key something, I'll select something that is key and then hit S and then comma S, comma S, comma S, and just make sure that, okay, it's not moving correctly right now, but these are the keys. Now I basically put keys where they need to go in the frame. So this can be downwards here. And then starting to come up, but not quite there. And then here it definitely is. Oh, what do you know? It actually rotates the sphere as well. That must be in a lattice. I'm interested in this rig. How and why the rigger decided to make the geometry the controls. And then definitely almost like nose diving at this point. 1, 2, kind of maybe between 2 and 3 frames. It flattens out again. In fact, I'll just zero it. Okay, so let's go back. And now it's my tail's turn to pick up those keyframes from that mover. Deselect the mover, and my keys are still showing. Can you see those? They are key tick size 3. Let's make it 4. Hopefully you can see those. Sometimes they're hard to see. Okay, so goes up. And really, I keep things pretty calm in the air. So I'm going to just build a little bit of a pose. But this is, again, by no means pose-to-pose animation. Just because I say the word pose doesn't mean that that's what this actually is. Just want to see what it looks like if I could get a little bit of counterpose in there, but not really. And then this needs to kind of slap down. I'm going to zero it one more time. Okay. And again, building just a little bit of what could be considered a pose of this tail. So in the action section here, so let me give us about 4 frames to get into that anticipation pose. And this will be basically my start pose for this tail. Okay, something like this. Middle mouse drag, set key. So that's a good start. All right, so what we have is, just to recap, and this is, if you took a break right now and you're journaling your workflow, you'd write down, just took 15 minutes to key all controls on the tail, straight ahead, rotation only. 15 minutes, whatever. That's it. Doesn't have to tell you. Doesn't have to, like, you're not going to write it down and then go, what? You're going to have all of everything you've written down, and then like weeks later, read back a couple days worth of just little notes, and remind yourself where you were and the decisions you made. That will be the eye-opening moment. All right. So we're in a good place right now. That was a good amount of, I think, posing, good amount of keys, not too dense. And now that we've done that straight ahead pass, we can start looking a little bit closer at how the bones are kind of successively breaking, and how to take advantage of some of the, some of the things that Maya can help us do to stay on workflow. Like by doing offsets rather. Okay, so like I said, let's just take a closer look. So that's super floaty right here, but that's okay. We're just going to look at the jump section. So this part especially really needs some offsets. It really needs to feel like the base of the tail is really whipping and pushing down and leaving the rest of this behind. Okay. So this would be the time when I grab these, and maybe in the timeline like I just did, maybe in the graph editor, maybe in the dope sheet, doesn't matter where, but I would just do 1 frame offset and then see if I'm on the right track. Okay? And what I see is that these are probably going to need, there we go. These are probably going to need a little bit more overlap, a little bit more custom shape in this section. Okay, I'm just going to do 1 more frame of offset and see what I'm dealing with. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to actually work this pose just a little bit. This tail is not actually that intuitive in terms of the shape that you do get for the pose change that you make. It's decent. It's good. It's better than decent. It's good. Just looking for, I can be very picky. So that feels a lot more like the base of the tail is actually really pushing down and pushing off than it was before for me. And I like the contrast of the end of that whip of the tail. Remember, I only offset this section. So the tail will whip because the time between these two frames, well, what's now 28 used to be 26, and frame 32 is going to it's going to whip a lot more, and it's going to feel a lot floatier in contrast in the second half of the jump. So I really like the effect that I'm getting there. Okay. And then on this impact, I'm just going to see, I'm going to do that same thing. I'm just going to do 1 frame of offset. I doubt I'll need more here. But what I'm going for is just a little bit more breaking up of that whipping action. Yeah, to me that feels better already. Let me extend this 1 frame. Oops. Extend this animation 1 frame. Okay. And now. Yep, go here. Probably can't get this curled over, so I'm going to do the good old trick of going halfway and copying the key. Yeah. Okay, so this is with 1 frame, 2 frame offset on that first one, and then 1 frame offset on that second one. Not bad. Not bad at all. Okay, and now the last thing as part of my workflow that I do is I check the camera and I start looking at silhouettes. So we have no lights in the scene, so we can really just take a close look at silhouette here. And it kind of gets straight. I was noticing this when I was watching before. It kind of gets a little too straight here. So I'm probably going to take this and I'm actually going to bring it up 2 frames in total, so that it actually starts bending downwards a little bit earlier. Yeah, still not getting it. So let's just adjust this pose. Yeah, see the problem here? It's coming up and almost everything is flattening out. That's the real problem. And a lot of it has to do with this this shaper control that I have as well that's working against me. Maybe the peak should be somewhere around this frame instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to frame this key and delete. Okay? So actually I can already delete that one, I know that. Let's have it still rising up here. Nope, still have that hitch. Let's do the same thing again. I'm just gonna frame and delete this one and make this a little bit lower. Again, still flying up. You know what? Frame 32 might have been the right frame to do this one. No, see, that's not fast enough. Yeah. Okay, so let's now adjust this pose one more time. And I know I can get it with this one now. I just need to adjust this down. Bam. Ah, very good. Okay, so this is another moment. We just quickly jot down. You say, was having problem with the tail looking like it was flattening, it's just going straight and doing this weird flattening at the top of the arc. And looked at the curves and found that the position of the tail, which is controlled by the rotation of the ball, was basically countering, going against the rotation of the ball. So I retimed that basically and made them work together. And that's it. Then go back to work. If you have one note like that an hour, you'll fill up a page in a single work section, right? So that's basically the workflow. Now you can get super finicky. You can put, I do still notice just a breath of that flattening out and a little bit of a hitch at the top there. That's okay. That's all right. No problem there. We can always fix that. We can always change that. So that's not a big deal. Overall, this would be definitely where I would want to be for the amount of time that I've put into this already, using that straight ahead workflow. Okay, so let's move on to the second type, which is something like, I'm going to save this. I'm going to try to give this to you. I have to delete the reference, so you'll have to give me a sec to do that. Actually, I'll do that off cam, of course, and good. All right, so I'll transfer that animation onto a reference so that I'm not handing out the rig itself. Okay, so let's do a new scene. This time I know I'm going to reference in my character. And I'm going to, I like to reference Bloke. Bloke is not the strongest rig in the world. He's got plenty of problems, but the one thing I do like about him is that he is a good example of how you can go too far in working a FK, IK hybrid spine very, very, very quickly. Okay, so so here's our character. Let's turn off joints because no one wants to see that. Okay, and let's just animate really quickly this fall that I'm talking about. Okay, so it's falling, lands. I was just, fast in on that key down here. And that's one thing I just want to point out. A lot of the problem with a walk cycle, if you're doing it, and definitely a run cycle, is that you guys are not doing fast in on those Y curves. You're doing a slow in. And even if it might be a really quick slow in, like one frame, the difference is huge at speed. So you need to, let me set another key like right here. You need to break these tangents, you've got to, and then flat this one so that you have that foot really slamming and coming to a dead stop. The eye can pick up on that really easily, so be aware. So now basically, let me just key this kind of like as I see it, and I'll do overlap on the hands as well, but this is mostly like a spine demo. No big deal though. Oh no, these are FK. That's what I wanted. Okay, so let me just get these into some sort of, oh my god, I'm falling kind of position. Okay, these work, or these, what are those, translates? That's fine. All right, so I'm just going to key him kind of backwards. And now, here's where the weird kind of pose to pose kind of like creeps in. So I will always kind of set a couple keys that are necessary, like with this physical work, like this one. But then what I'll do is I'll want everything to kind of be smoothed together almost from the get-go. meaning I know that this is the point where his legs are completely straight and his body's completely, his hips and his waist are the perfect range to make it so that he's standing totally straight. Well, this might not be the, this might not be the actual impact frame. And this is a huge problem. If you haven't seen the contact lecture in the the store, you got to check it out. All right, because this is all about that. You key that contact frame too early, then it always looks a little bit weird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually key 2 frames later, and I'm just going to translate him down as if he's landed and he's taking the weight right there. Okay. But notice what I do, all right? I set a key right here, all right? I delete this key right here, okay? And then I make it so that this is basically translating just to the point where it looks like it's going to be, it's just about to hit. And I look at the animation and I make sure that that arc is fasting in. Okay, so basically it's slowing in ever so slightly if the tangent is below the line. Anytime the tangent is below that curve, it means it's slowing in. Okay. If it's above the curve, it means it's fasting in, all right? And if it's right on, it means it's going linearly into it, okay? So I want to just make sure that I have a little bit of fast into that, all right? So I maintain that nice, that nice impact, and then I can start working what's going on after, okay? So this is translation only, just for now, all right? Then he's going to land. And I'm going to have him land for 2 frames, or 4 frames rather, okay? So I'm going ahead another 2 frames. Again, this is all straight ahead. And I'm doing translation only, okay? And then what I'll do is, this is where I was talking about that weird pose-to-pose kind of overlappy thing comes in. I'll do rotation only right here, okay? And for the settle, I'll have him, like, let's say 4 frames, come back to normal, okay? 2 frames later, I'll set a rotation only key back here. 4 frames after that, I'll set a translation only key here, and then I'll do both, hit set key to set both, and he's straight and standing tall, okay? So, all right, you see that? See what that did? It made the overlap so that it was already offset from the body pose. And this is only possible, again, with overlap that is part of the body pose, but is purely physical. All right? This is because he landed. This is not because he's transitioning from a pose, or I'm trying to get, a little bit more elegant or organic animation out of him. This is demanded of him, but it's in the body. So it's not quite like type 1, which is just like an attached floppy thing that you have to overlap all day. Okay? Okay. And I do see that he's standing up too straight and then ducking down too much and then standing up too straight too quickly. I do see that. And I'll probably just go right into my Y curve, and I'll just calm this all down by scaling it in value to be just a little bit closer to what I'm doing here. Okay, something like that. Okay, now it's too tall. So I scaled it, but I should have moved it back down. All right, and maybe still, nobody's perfect. Maybe still a little bit too much, wiggly giggly in that Y curve. There we go. Okay. So so that's good. Now I definitely want him I'm okay putting, this is just translation in Z right now. This is not a key, that had everything set on yet, okay? So I'm going to go back, go into my graph editor, show all, and go to my translate Z and just make sure things are looking like I want them. Like, so for instance, that's probably way too much. Wait, this is probably way too quick, too fast. I wanted it sooner, but I didn't want it that quickly. So let's just do one frame like that, all right? And you notice how I didn't move that keyframe because I don't need it. Clearly, everything I need is being given to me here. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly snap a buffer curve, and I'm going to clean this up and just make this just a little bit easier to read here with the keyframes that I do have. I'm just going to make sure that this is weighted and just work this just a little bit. Why not, right? We'll clean it up while I'm here. No reason not to. Okay. You can start from a little further up. I'm just gonna make them start a little bit higher up. And yeah, that's fine. And fast in more because he's falling further, right? Okay. So both of these can fast in just even a little bit more. I'm going to grab this guy, which is his base control, and see what's going on right here. Looks like his body just wants him to overlap more, so I'm going to let it. I'm just going to delete this and use the tangents to my advantage, and there we go. Now it's smoother and it's better, right? Okay, so let's go into the spine, because like I said, this guy's got a spine. It's FK-IK hybrid, so it means you can get some pretty unpredictable results really quickly if you're not careful. I believe only, yeah. So the top control doesn't really. It's weird. It spins kind of in place. It's kind of weird. It doesn't exactly feel like a total IK spine. I know that there's some head isolation. I don't think you can turn it off though. It definitely looks like that head ISO is there to stay. Let me just see. No, those are all phase controls. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. It doesn't matter. No, but actually, no, it's good because we can get what what I need to show you what's going on. So he's falling. I'm not doing the legs. Notice I'm not doing the legs. We're just looking at basically what happens in kind of like a really physical but straight ahead overlap situation. My next step would be to key it. Again, I move forward to the really interesting bit. I'm not worried about trying to figure out what would it look like up in air, and then when I get to this part, it's kind of like, oh, dang it, I did it too soon. Like now I'm in a really weird pose and I gotta go back now. So probably just build this pose here. And again, I try to start in one channel, either translates or rotates. And when it's an FK-IK spine, definitely with rotates, okay? Now what's true is that you get a lot more, well, the kind of bend that we do as humans, if you notice and you're looking at somebody and they bend over, it's a lot like in the lower spine. And the upper spine does bend, of course, it bends over, but it's a little bit stiffer, and that curve is not as much as you can get out of your lower spine. So you get all these bones up here, and down here, all you have is just the spine. So if you want to account for that, you might want to dial back your shape and then go a little bit bigger with your lower spine at all times. That's totally fine. You can do that and get this overlap workflow looking good. So same thing, probably bend everything back just a little bit more. And remember, this is going to look too big, right? How do I know that? Because I'm purposefully making it too big, because you go big and then you reel it in. You don't try to push it over and over and over and over. Okay, so it looks like he's starting to stand up at this frame. So 2 frames after the start of it, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to 0 that pose. And then I'm going to have him leaning forward and put a little bit more in the lower back than the rest. Okay, in fact, maybe even tone down these two a little bit more. Okay, set a key. All right, now here he is going forward. 1, 2. Actually, he really goes right here. So 1, 2. I'm going to 0 it again. I don't want to mess with keys that are screwing me up. And now I would need a few more frames to really resolve that spine. But I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it on its way back to home here by 0ing it. Okay, setting a key. Making sure all the channels are set on 22. Okay. Okay. All the channels are on 22, and it's 0 at 24. So I'm going to go to 23. Middle mouse drag, hit S, and now I have halfway. That might be even a little too much, so I'm going to do it one more time. Yeah. It's actually, cumulatively, it's like 3 degrees of difference, but makes a difference, okay? So then I might watch back what I have. Okay. Well, it feels super cartoony, and at this point I would probably see what I can get away with global scaling. So I'm going to select all my controls, and I know that 0 is you know, basically my 0'd pose, and I know that any deviation from that basically is either tilting forward or backwards. So the point I'm driving at is I know that I can scale from the origin from 0, and I will be actually scaling literally just the size of what I'm getting here. Okay, so I'm going to grab all these curves. I'm not sure what any of them do. Doesn't matter at all. And I'm going to say this is probably like 50% too big. All right, so 50% too big doesn't mean that I need to have it. It means I need it to be like 0.75. So I'm going to scale it in value right here. Multiply equals 0.75. Okay. So now this if this was 50% too big, now it's at the right level. Okay. All right, so let's watch it. Yeah, actually, you know what? I think that's kind of a bullseye on the at least the size of the overlap in the spine. I'm not super happy with the timing, but that can be fixed. Let's see what we got. See what we can get away with the timing. Where is the hit? It's at 8. Let's just drag it 1 frame earlier, see what happens. Yeah, that feels a lot smoother. 1 frame. It's amazing, isn't it? Isn't it crazy what 1 frame will do? Hopefully another thing that you're picking up from just watching me work right now is how much I will not judge or like necessarily do something because I know. I'll just I'm trying to say it out loud as often as I can, but I'll just be like, I don't know, maybe 2 frames? Let's see 2 frames, and then 2 frames, no, or oh, yes. So just sit back and kind of allow your scene to happen to you. You know everything you need to do. You have all the fundamentals. They're like tattooed on your rear end. You know that. I know you're an animator that does that, but you're probably getting in your own way just a little bit with how much you look at a shot and try to determine what would be perfect and what would be great and whatever. I did the overlap. I mean, look at me. I did the overlap straight ahead, pretty much not looking at my result until it was done. And I did it straight ahead, knowingly too big, knew it was too big, no big deal. Why worry about that? It's a super easy fix. So why worry about that? If you don't worry, you apply the workflow concepts that I'm showing you and allow your scene to kind of happen to you, then you can go back into the work with a fresh eye, because you're not trying to constantly correct it as you're going and losing your fresh eye. You can go in with that fresh eye, but also with kind of the confidence that you need to be able to judge things as they come at you and know, oh, that is good. You know, we lose our confidence as we work, as well as our fresh eye. We not only stop being able to see the problems, we lose the ability to, when we get that flash of inspiration, to act on it, knowing that it's exactly what is needed at that moment. All right, your workflow. If I can summarize this whole rant a little bit, your workflow should be finely tuned. It should always be improved upon to move you closer to the kind of person that tries crazier and crazier things with no regard, with no worry about the result. No worry at all about the result, because the result is what you want to happen to you. You want your scene to speak to you. You should have a conversation with your work, okay? If you're working like this, oh my God, I gotta fix, oh my God, I gotta fix that. You're not having a conversation to your work, you're dictating to your work. There's no energy going back and forth. But if you can sit back, relax, get ideas, have the confidence to know that you're going to be able to edit it, tweak it, turn it into exactly what it needs to be at the right time, what else is there? I mean, truly, I mean, I really struggle to really figure out what more you could want from your workflow. You know, besides that freedom, besides that just worry-free work habit, okay? So, yeah. So I'll save this as well. You can have this scene as well. I'll copy the animation onto a reference. Or did I reference him? I can't remember. Did I reference? Oh, I did. Yay for me. Okay, cool. So I'll just give you the scene. Now remember, we're looking at just the overlap as it pertains to workflow. So if you I mean, looking at these scenes might be good, they might be helpful. You're not really actually going to get too much from the curves themselves. You're actually getting everything that you're supposed to get from this lecture from actually watching me make the curves themselves. So anyway, but I'll give you the scene anyway. Here's type 2, Maya ASCII, beautiful. Okay, and so the last type, type 3, is when it does have to do with the pose, with the performance, and it's built into the character, and that is when you're not doing pose to pose. I mean, you're not doing straight ahead work, okay? And I gave you little hints for the other ones, and I didn't give you a hint for this type as to what you do. So with this type, it's very, very important to know that it is a bigger issue having way, 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 way terrible keyframe economy and a scene that is like basically uneditable than it is to get your overlap in. So to go all the way back and answer the animator that spawned this lecture, that asked the question about my overlap workflow, you have a lot of important issues that are more important than getting your overlap in before your breakdowns, most likely, and try to focus on all those. And if you want to just maybe put those aside and tweak your overlap workflow for like performance work, that's fine and that's great. But know that you do need to compartmentalize a little bit and get these back out at some point and really focus down on them, okay? Because overlap is essential. I mean, without it, you pick out animation really easily that lacks it, and it looks terrible, of course. But I guess the point I'm driving at is that it's not quite as essential to your workflow process as making sure that when you start timing things out, whether it be stepped mode or copied pairs or whatever, that you don't run over the sections that represent your transitions, therefore losing all of the power of your poses when you go to spline. That's a way bigger issue, okay? But this is also obviously pivotal. Everything's important. What am I saying? Everything's super important. Everything is the most important thing. Anyway, so I'm gonna go I guess I'll go with bloke again, and I'll show you. Now remember, if I'm working this fast, one of the more important things to consider is, actually, you know what? Yeah, because this is workflow. I was going to say, let's take a look at it like a more near finished scene, but you know what? This is workflow. So let's actually talk about the more important steps. Okay, so let's say bloke. I'm going to really quickly pose out a really rough pose here. Let's say bloke is trying to give somebody thumbs up, okay? And he's going to do this whole thing. Ignore the arm pinching. I don't know how I can fix that. Does this fix it? Please? No. Whatever. Be in IK. Yeah, I'm going to do this in IK. All right. The only reason I'm saying I'm going to do this in IK is because we've seen what an FK chain does, and a lot of times people are using IK for their performance work anyway, so let's do this in IK. All right, so the idea is that bloke is basically going to be giving somebody a thumbs up, and it's a thumbs up that's a very, very, very big thumbs up. So what he's doing is he's basically going, yeah, like that. All right, so that's the big performance. So when you're doing your performance work, obviously pose to pose, you're going to be building your poses, right? So I'm going to build this this beginning kind of pose, my lord, what am I saying? And I'm going to be just very roughly shaping major things like spine or whatever. Okay, and I'm just going to assume that the shot is kind of from like the waist up as well. So I'm just going to kind of frame it right here. Okay. Oops. I don't need that. Come back later. Don't call me. I'll call you. Okay. So we have our one pose, right? So let me just key that. Is bloke all curves? I think so. Is anything not a curve on bloke? Oh, you know what? It used to not be. Now it is. I think. I can't remember. Stop asking me. Okay. So let's first definitely convert our out tangent to before we set that key. Let's convert our out tangent to spline, or to stepped. Okay. So we have our beginning of our wind up. I'm going to pose what I call the apex of this action, the real beginning of him kind of like whipping out his arm. All right. I'm not worried about timing. If you've seen me work a few times, you know that I'm not worried about timing at all. I put a frame on 1, 5, why not 10? Who cares? Screw it. not a big deal. I need a new panel. Okay. Where are you? Okay. Maybe it's time for him to get into that thumbs up pose. Okay, good. And then 15, whatever, who cares, right? Now what I want to point out, the moment is coming up. Okay. Now let's make sure everything has a key on the right frames. Okay. So it just happened. Did you miss it? It's easy to. When I went from this intermediate, basically the breakdown, is kind of the breakdown, because really your two key poses are when he's about to do it and then when he's got it. So you asked to see my workflow. So that thing that is a breakdown that truly defines the arc, right? 2 points, it's a straight line. You have no arc with a straight line. You need at least 3 points to and it's super rudimentary because it's linear, basically. You need at least 3 points to define an arc, okay? So my workflow is definitely to make sure that those breakdowns are in there. So I'm not going to wait until I am perfectly happy with this and with this, okay? I'm going to put that in there. Why? Because it also defines my overlap. That middle breakdown defines how much overlap. It's going to have an effect no matter how much I tweak it, no matter how much I change it and work with it and whatever, it doesn't matter. No matter what you do in your scene at the very beginning is going to survive, it's going to persist, it's going to affect what happens later on in your scene in terms of the lifespan of your shot, no matter what. So I always try to get as much in as I can, but in a fundamental way, all right? So I know that the more overlap, the more snap it's going to be. He's not going to go, straight. That was without any overlap in my body. Straight from here to here. With more overlap, it's more wacky. It's more like a whip. And if it whips, it's going to seem like really excited. So I know that high level note of like, oh, make him really excited. Like he's like a used car salesman trying to get like his millionth customer to win the Cadillac or whatever. Make it really cheesy and goofball. Well, I know that that's wired into, it's connected, it's married to overlap. All right, so I'm going to give myself the opportunity right off the bat to define that, okay? So instead of getting this, this straight action, I'm going to get the whack, that whipping thing, okay? So that's the trick. And in fact, in terms of my personal workflow, that's really the only trick that is in there. That's the only thing that's different about my workflow that I can really identify from what is like taught. And this is not even unique to me at all. I mean, I see this all the time and we naturally fall into it. I probably do this because I naturally fell into it anyway, except I am the workflow maniac, meaning I sat for as long as I've been animating like this, thinking about why I animate like this, and what I'm telling you right now is that conclusion. Okay, so let's take a real close look at that moment that I said that I didn't want you to miss. Okay, so he's going, and then that moment right there, where it is basically the action's happening, it's unfurling before it gets into that end pose. And so now that I have something right here, I think it's frame 10, yeah. Okay, now that I have something on frame 10, I can work it. And look at the way I work it. Do I think to myself like, oh, I know exactly what to do. Step aside, I'll animate it. No, not at all. I have no idea. I'm not sure how I can impart this on you in a way that like you'll really get it. I have no idea what I just did. I have no idea what I just did. Okay, but how long did that take me? It took me 20 seconds while I was talking. Okay, if I was concentrating, it would have taken me 10. And now I get to watch some new animation. Awesome. It's almost as if it happened so quickly, it wasn't even me that did it. It didn't reduce my fresh eyes at all. I didn't even have time to ask myself if it was the right thing to do, so it's not going to reduce my confidence if I'm animating correctly at all. And I might see animation that's better. I might see animation that's worse, but I do know that if it's not any better, then I can do it again. I do know that if it is better, I will be seeing almost like brand new animation that just like landed on my lap. And oh goody, I get to work from this now. I get to move on from here now. I get to do more and more and more experiments, okay? So I just like upped the ante totally like overboard on the overlap on his elbow and his body. And let's see what I get. You know what, it is better, but what I'm noticing now is that this beginning kind of moment really does need to be a little bit more separated from what I'm doing over here in this section. Okay, and I'm going to add, I don't know what it's going to do, I don't know, I'm going to add a little bit of head to this overlap as well. Really like that. What I don't like is how, what I love about it is how it really looks like the elbow is leading the action now, because the elbow comes up and cranks out that hand. So what I would probably do is when I spline this, make sure that on frame 12, there's a nice breakdown that the elbow is still leading that action. I want an arc like this, okay? All right, I was gonna whip out annotate, but I don't think it shows up on Camtasia. No, it does. Duh. Of course it does. I want an arc, you know, I really want that to come down really nicely, come down and lead that action. And the hand to look like it cranks on top of it and comes to a really nice stop right here. All right? So really good. But what I don't like is how it looks like this hand is really rotating, super hard. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to look at kind of the pose right here and try to work the force a little bit, because this is a really strong force. Like this turning right is really kind of like pushing everything down. So let me try to kind of work this just a little bit more. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, much better, much better. Isn't it amazing? Again, isn't it amazing? The smallest tweaks make all the difference. Well, shucks. I'm going to save this file. You can have that one as well. Remember though, don't go into the file and be like, what is the secret of this overlap? What is it? I got to dissect the keys. It's not in there. It's in how I was thinking. It's in the magic of animation, the magic of getting in the zone is not found in that file. It's not found in any file. It's found in this moment. It's literally that moment. It's doing something super quickly, and you can do it quickly only because you've practiced it a lot. Okay? It's doing it super quickly, and then like, let's watch some new animation. Ooh, that's good. And how much more fun is it to work from even better animation? I'm gonna move on from here. How lucky are you? How lucky are you, really? Fantastic. So let me just quickly recap everything we talked about today. Number one, it is a workflow issue. Obviously, it's a workflow question, and you have to commit yourself to workflow. Write it down. Take a look at mine. Realize that mine's not going to look anything like yours. It has to be personal. Journal your workflow. Log it. Just start doing that. I promise. I posted a video on my Facebook. That's Tony Robbins, and he talks about the millimeter difference. And if you're discouraged, or if you're having a tough time with the animation or whatever, that millimeter difference, that might be the key. I really believe that. And for a lot of people, let me tell you this, for every single person that was having a huge roadblock that I taught at Animation Mentor, journaling the workflow was just opened up, just cleared all pathways for them. They had an unbroken boulevard of green lights after that, okay? Think about it. Think about it. Next, with overlap, it is one of those face value kind of fundamentals that I like to build fundamentally into my performance scenes, meaning I need to know what effect it's going to have on the high level performance of that character. Like that high level note, make him happier, sadder. Oh, he doesn't look like he's confused there, whatever it is. Trickle all the way back down to those face value kind of fundamentals and build them in appropriately, knowing that that's what it's going to control. Okay? There are basically 3 different approaches that I use for the appropriate shot, depending on what it calls for. If it's just something attached that needs to overlap, I work very straight ahead, do a little bit of offsets, and check silhouette and pose, and then you're basically done. If it is something that is built into the body, but it's a lot more physical, basically purely physically demanded of the body to overlap to get into that pose, I work very straight ahead, but I also do a little bit of trickery with not posing on the same frame. And that kind of makes it a little bit more pose to pose as well. Even though I'm working straight forward, I know that the literal pose that I want is not going to be on that frame that I could key the translations and the rotations. So I might translate the hips up, and then 2 frames later rotate the spine, and then 2 frames later translate the hips down, and then 2 frames later rotate the spine. So you have this already offset thing happening, okay? That takes practice. Give that a shot, though. It doesn't mean that you can't give it a shot. Definitely give that a shot. It'll be a little while before you're doing that naturally, but I do think it's a great workflow for that kind of stuff, like falls and swings and bumps and hits and physical stuff in the body. And then for performance work, like I said, it's a face value fundamental. Overlap is just like squash and stretch anticipation. It almost has like a mathematical value to it because it's so physical. But when it really determines your performance, I find that it is a lot easier to determine that performance and get it in there by working fundamentally, knowing that it's going to control a very fundamental aspect of your performance. How wacky is this guy? Is he just like, yes, or is he like, wah? You know, that's going to be completely defined, dictated, and demanded of that character to hit that, and for it to be right and accurate and good looking. So that being the case, we need to make sure that we get it in there. And my workflow is to hit my key poses, and then when I'm defining very, 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 very roughly things like arcs, I sneak in that decision and that little adjustment, that little place that's like a knob on a mixing board, that place where I'm going to, in fact, in my advanced workflow lecture, I call it knobs, okay? It's a little knob that I can adjust, I can tweak in the scene, okay? So it's gotta be in there if I'm gonna work with it, though. And then overall, don't forget that overlap is one part of a huge, basically huge Well, you have to have a huge repertoire, right, in order to bring it all together for a for a great performance. And overlap is a part of that, and it's an essential part. It can't be missing. But focus purely on performance and getting to the right performance for your character, and practice the overlap workflows that I showed you today, and you'll be in great shape. Thank you for watching. I hope you got a lot out of this. You can download the scene files and take a look, and have fun with those if you like. Practice, practice, practice. I promise that'll really help you improve your work, is if you just practice small little things, just practice those small little things. If you'd like to see a lecture on a topic that I haven't discussed, you can suggest it in the resource wish list, which is in the forum. Just go there, find the resource wish list, put it in there. Nothing is stupid, and sometimes even if you don't even know what you're trying to ask, it will inspire me, and I'll get a lecture out of it. So I really appreciate your help. Direct the site. I've got a little bit of a cold. I'm not sure if you can hear that. I'm not feeling 100%. But it doesn't matter. The show must go on. Thank you for watching. Encourage each other. Check out the forums. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And we're going to have a great time. I'm looking forward to this winter. It's going to be very busy. Look for more news on the site. And good luck with your animation. As always, rock on.